All right. Well, we see that both of these players have 4 points in the top of the screen. That means they have 1 win and 1 draw so far today. New scoring system this season in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour in the ratio 3-1. $750 for a win, $250 for a draw. So it is a lot more lucrative now to win those games. And here we go with the King's Pawn.
Yeah, and Jovanka has called the opening correctly. Both sides opening with their King's Pawn. When Magnus lost to Esipenko in Vaikanze a couple of years ago, it was in the Sicilian defence where it was really, really sharp, that battle. But Esipenko navigated the complications better than his opponent. So now it's the Italian game, something we've seen a lot on the first season of the Champions Chess Tour, but also we saw in the World Championship match with Magnus, and now Magnus just developing his bishop 1 square. Very safe, very solid. It looks like all the pieces will be on the board for a long time, and this one will become a manoeuvring battle. Meanwhile, white castling the king. Black doing the same.
Yep. So far, so good. And now this opening is really complicated because there's a variety of piece development moves that white can play, and there's lots and lots of choice. But Esipenko decides to play a relatively solid line, which is just to develop his knight, and now he does what Magnus Carlsen likes to do himself, which is expand as much as possible on the queen side by advancing the pawn. How is Magnus going to react to his favourite strategy? Well, we'll see. What do you think he'll play for? Trading of bishops?
Possibly, so Black can bring his light squared bishop out now. I was going to say it's just Magnus' style to do the same, to copy. He doesn't like to allow his opponents to gain space, especially with their rook's pawns, their corner pawns. So Magnus there blocking the advance of White's A pawn, White's Alice pawn there, and it will slow down the pace of the game for a while. The Italian game does have that type of characteristic where later on, in the late middle game, maybe early endgame, that's when things really start to happen. I don't think we'll see any attacks on either side's king anytime soon, but it's all about who can put their piece on better squares, who can make the correct types of trades, and Magnus, he's vastly experienced in these types of positions. And yeah, I'm expecting Esipenko now maybe just to move the white rook next to the king to the centre. Maybe white could just push a pawn to secure some squares on his king side as well. Plenty of options, but yeah, no opening theory here. This one isn't about memory work or about homework. It's just about understanding of the position.
Yeah, I agree with you there 100%, because whenever I tried to play this opening with the white pieces, I was lost in the whole move orders. And then it kind of dawned on me, actually, something you said, it's all kind of hinges on whose bishop is better. And that's it. And OK, you are getting the prediction spot on, David. The rook has moved.
So
and now,
yeah,
and now I'm kind of curious, will Magnus just offer a trade of bishops, or will he just kind of do something else, you know, maybe push a king's pawn 1 square forward, not the king's pawn, the rook pawn next to the king. Yep. Push it 1 square forward just because it's a move, nice controlling the circuit of the white knight.
Yeah, I think that one maybe is the most likely from Magnus, so just pushing Black's h-pawn 1 square. That's quite a thematic move in this type of position, just covering any potential advances by White's pieces. Also, it does allow Black to maybe manoeuvre a bit later on. It's not Magnus' style necessarily to trade off the light squared bishops here with Black, because that would give him potentially a pawn structure that he likes to play against rather than have himself. So I would be slightly surprised to see Magnus offer to trade those light squared bishops, even though that's maybe one of the most logical moves in the position. Either way, Magnus, he'll do something useful. He'll slowly improve a piece, slowly improve his pawn structure, and he'll hope that he's solid enough to withstand a potential advance by Esipenko in the centre at some point.
I just got excited because I was checking the database and I was like, OK, there's a whole range of moves. But Black does have a very aggressive plan at his disposal, which is actually to tuck his king into the corner, step back with the knight to where the king originally is, and then go forward.
Yeah.
How likely do you think this is going to be?
I think unlikely, unless your name is Levon Aronian. This is Aronian's favourite plan in the position, to tuck the king away, as Jovanka mentioned. And if White, say, plays a normal move, just pushes a pawn, covering the square to stop the Black bishop or knight using it, then suddenly the knight retreats, And as Esipenko mentioned, it's all to do with pushing the f-pawn forward, f for forward, and trying to undermine white's center from the side. So, for example, again, if white just moves the bishop, this pawn pushes forward, and either now, as white, you trade off, but now black has kind of a rock-solid pawn formation in the center, and white has one pawn fewer in the middle, or you allow the continued advance. For example, if you just move, you allow the continued advance of black's pawns, and suddenly this black pawn chain is connect 4 already, but it will also be joined by further pawn pushes, and black would go on the attack on this side of the board. Magnus doesn't go for this, however. This idea is mostly linked to Levon Aronian. Nobody else is really brave enough to do this, open up their own king. Magnus instead bringing his knight forward, and Kaya, I heard a sound because the evaluation bar doesn't like it.
Well, it definitely had a reaction, and you know, when it's above 1, then it's usually something to at least notice, I guess.
Definitely, fully agree. And actually, I think this is quite a clever move as well by Esipenko. The white knight might have looked nice and pretty on the square it sat on, but it's retreated. It's going over towards the white king side. It's actually going to park itself next to its other white knight. But now as well, the white c-pawn has been freed up. It will push forward to the square previously occupied by that knight and kick away black's knight from this half of the board. So a logical move. It will involve Magnus having to lose a bit more time later on, and this is just a typical maneuver that you see time and time again in the Italian opening, in the Spanish opening. It's all about pattern recognition, and Esipenko, using those patterns he's kind of assimilated in his brain, just goes for it immediately, barely spending any time. I quite like it for white.
I quite like it for white as well. And I have to say, there's only one game in my database, but it's quite curious who the players were. The player with the white pieces was Jordan van Forest, who was Magnus Carlsen's second during the World Championship match against Jan Nepomniachtchi. And black was Ivan Ivanisevic from Serbia. And there, that game finished with white winning.
Okay, so we saw that actually in the previous round. White had a good score in an opening Magnus chose, and Magnus went on to win. And now white has at least one kind of prolific victory in this position, and Esipenko with the white pieces. Yeah, I just have a feeling Magnus would rather have this position with white than with black. And it's Magnus over the last season of the tour. We saw him use the Italian time and time again, winning nearly every single game with white in the Italian. He seems to love these types of positions with white, but that doesn't necessarily translate into loving the positions from the other side of the board. Often I find if I play an opening with white, if I play it as well with black, I'm slightly biased. I just prefer white's position. I prefer white's ideas. I'm more familiar with them. And, OK, Magnus finally does offer the trade of bishops. Not normally his style, as we mentioned, but maybe he just felt there was nothing else to do. White's light-squared bishop was superior to that black bishop. But the evaluation bar off over to white's side again.
Something else I'm noticing is that Andrey is very, loose and fidgety, and I don't know if he's nervous or excited. Or is he like this in over-the-board chess as well, or is this something he's bringing into online chess here?
Yeah, he's a bit like this over the board. I noticed I played him in the Grand Swiss back in October, November in Latvia, and I managed to win eventually. But I noticed when he was doing well, he was quite fidgety. When he was doing badly, it was clearly visible in his face. He just didn't stay at the board.
Wow.
He was walking around, like kind of exhaling. And so he's quite, I don't think with his face necessarily, but just with his body language, he's quite emotive. So.
I also can confirm, because I also played him 1 year in the Grand Swiss in 2019, and we had a tense position, and he seemed focused, but as soon as I played a move that he didn't like, that I thought was bad for me, he immediately sat up and he was like, and then, like you say, fidgety, and he kind of gave the game away that, I made the mistake, and that was it. He was going to pounce.
Yeah.
So, conclusion is, if he's doing well, he'll be fidgety. If he's not doing well, he'll be shaking his head probably, and it'll be quite clear.
Oh.
OK. He's teasing us now. He's doing a bit of everything.
I do love this about online chess. The players are definitely giving us some body language, and Andrey Esipenko is one of those. We did have a couple of moves on the board. What's happening?
Yep, a couple of moves, so very logical from both sides. The light-squared bishops did get traded, and now there is a small imbalance in the position. It's all to do with black's central pawn structure. Those doubled e-pawns, they can be a strength. Black does have a semi-open line for his rook now, but they can be a weakness, especially long-term. in the endgame. So Magnus actually has a fantastic track record in this type of position against that pawn structure. How will he fare with that pawn structure himself? Just to demonstrate some ideas, and maybe you can talk us through this, Ivanka. These pawns, what do you think? They can be targeted, right?
They
Queen can come out at some point.
Exactly. And one of the key features about that pawn structure is that, yes, the F-line is open for the black rook, but these double pawns, they just can't move. And often you judge that whether double pawns are good by whether they are able to move forward. And these two, they are absolutely stuck. There's no way that the D pawn, the queen's pawn, is actually going to assist in the movement. Nothing can happen. So that situation is very, very static. And that means that they can be targets. And David highlighted a move. The queen can come out and attack the pawn. In fact, she can attack two pawns if she's feeling very spicy.
I'm not sure immediately, because the black knight will jump out attacking the queen and defending these two pawns, as we mentioned. But white could easily prepare that. White could just plant the bishop in the centre, guarding this square, and then now the white queen will jump out. And I think this is quite unpleasant. You also mentioned this pawn push with black. Sometimes it's playable, but even if white just ignores this, this pawn structure is so fragile now. Two of the pawns are frozen. They're completely locked down. But this one as well, it doesn't really want to push forward. You lose all flexibility, and you definitely don't want to ever trade in the centre, because now look at them. They're isolated. They're even weaker than before. So even if you get a chance to push forward, normally in chess we recommend occupying the centre with your pawns. But actually, they're just as weak here and vulnerable as they were previously. So, OK, meanwhile, most logical move in the position played by Esipenko. This piece doing nothing, he brings it out using all of his pieces. And this is also a rock-solid formation. So black can never really use this semi-open F-file for his advantage, because white's minor pieces are just poised perfectly.
But then the question is, what is black's plan for moving forward? I mean, he can't move his... that bishop move was really good by Esipenko, because suddenly the black knight can't develop to its natural square, and the queen is in the way of the black rooks connecting with each other, and she doesn't actually have a great square to go to either. I mean, maybe she can... Exactly.
Yeah, often she tries this manoeuvre, but actually she's just going to be staring off against some very strong, well-fortified white knights. So it feels a bit slow. Also, the queen move would allow white to jump out with a double attack, as we mentioned, and this would be very awkward for black to face. Do you really have to contort yourself and retreat this knight to defend your pawns? Look at this. This is just passive. It's a bit sad. And now white is the one able to break in the centre when ready. Maybe white will just bring all the pieces to the party first and then start mobilising. It's awkward for Magnus Carlsen. I don't think he'll like his position. Let's go back to the players, because right now, white does have a small, stable advantage.
I feel we should have a rhyme for double pawns. We have it for so many of the situations on the board, and we could talk about double pawns all the time, but we don't have a rhyme for the double pawns, do we?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We don't have anything.
Double pawns are...
What rhymes with doubled or pawns?
I'm going to throw it out to the people out in the world using the hashtag ChessChamps.
Yeah, definitely.
What should be the rhyme for the double pawns?
We need to get the hive minds together, because I remember when we were stuck with knight in the corner, Twitter came to our rescue and they gave us a rhyme.
Yeah.
But I can't remember said rhyme, but it was certainly good ones. So yeah, Twitterverse, please help us come up with a rhyme for double pawns.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing we learned from the first season of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, that our Twitter followers, our viewers, they're far more creative than us.
Wow, yeah. The creativity out in the world with our followers is amazing. I'm going to be eager to see now if we get some cool suggestions. It's very hard to find something that rhymes with pawn.
Dawn.
Dawn, horn, morn.
Morn.
I will mourn that double pawn.
Ah!
I don't know.
There we go.
I don't know.
That's a very good one. Well, look, see, now when you play a game, David, and you want to make that move, but I will mourn that double pawn. I will not make that move.
I might not be able to play against Magnus H10, but I can come up with rhymes.
Yeah, OK. So we actually have a move from Magnus and actually a little plan. He's actually activated his knight. So,
Wait, really? Because Ivanka, the knight came from that square on the last move.
Yeah, that's true.
He literally just retreated his knight. White made a very useful move, and then he brought it back where it came from. Magnus has just lost 2 moves.
Ooh.
I mean, the knight maybe is better here than where it previously stood, but I don't understand it. And Esipenko there kind of shook his head, being like, what are you up to, Magnus? What's the plan? And personally, I don't get it. At the very least, white could play a kind of practical joke and retreat the white bishop back where it came from and said, OK, we've had this position before. That's the second time. What do you want to do now?
Chess players are not that kind,
Yeah,
David.
chess players aren't that generous.
They say, you lost some moves, I will take advantage of that. Yeah, but I like the joke, though.
If it was a non-important game, I would just retreat my bishop and say, OK, Magnus, you lost some time.
Yeah.
What are you doing next? But no, strange one. And just to explain as well on the board what's just happened, because how do we explain this? In this position, it's black to play. This is 2 moves ago. We're rewinding. Black simply retreated his knight back. Quite a logical move, opening up his rook. And as we mentioned, maybe the knight wants to jump over to this side of the board. White now brought the bishop out. Also a very useful move, developing a piece, improving a piece. And now Magnus just brought the knight back. I can barely even explain it with words here, because it just looks like he's lost time. And he could have spent that time more usefully, bringing his queen forward, connecting the black rooks. He could have spent that time maybe just shuffling his king in the corner to a safer square. He could have done plenty of more useful things. But now Magnus, I don't know what his plan is. I guess he wants to meet the queen jumping out to attack this pawn, attack this diagonal, with moving his own queen forward, setting a nasty trap. Queen takes pawn now would actually trap the white queen. This white queen would be doomed and punished for her greed. But, I mean, is that really worth spending 2 moves for? Just a simple trap like that one? And if white does bring the queen out, for example, if black does reply with this queen move, Esipenko now could just maybe push a pawn forward, bring his rook to the center. There's many useful moves with which he can profit from black's loss of time, loss of tempi. So, yeah, very, very strange stuff happening on the board. It shows that Magnus can't be too comfortable with his position.
No, he's struggling for a plan, and maybe he's just resorting to those psychological ploys. You know, you kind of say, OK, I'm going to be very provocative here, and I'm going to invite you to punish me for wasting time. On the other hand, I do admire Magnus for admitting that his last move was a mistake. And it did remind me of the Norwegian mountain rules.
Mountain rules?
Yeah, the mountain rules.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say something about Norwegian pub quizzes. I'm really traumatised by them because they're like Mensa tests. And one of the questions was, how many mountain rules are there in Norway? And I was like, I have 27. I just said like that. The answer is 9. But anyway, one of the rules is it's never too late to turn back.
Yep. That's the most important one.
Is it number 1? OK, well, so here it is in the position. You know, you should never be too proud to admit that you've made a mistake and retreat your knight to where it came from.
Yeah, I've recently been watching on Chessable The 7 Deadly Chess Sins by Jonathan Rowson, based on one of my favourite books, and that's based on the 7 deadly sins. And one of the 7 deadly sins is pride. You can't be too proud. You can't think, OK, I've chosen this plan, it's got to be a good one, I'm going to persevere with it. Because sometimes it turns out to be a bad plan. You just got to rewind and just got to say, OK, I lost 2 moves. And life goes on. So the 7 Deadly Chess Sins, as we see there's a special offer on, but it does talk through some of the reasons why we make mistakes as humans, some of the psychology. And actually, Magnus, yes, he maybe made some mistakes on the board, but in terms of psychology, it shows how strong he is and how flexible he is. Even if he makes a mistake, he's fine with it. He'll just go back and start again. And now we've seen some trades in the center. I'm not actually a fan of this from Esipenko. The evaluation bar still thinks white's doing well, but he has clarified the situation in the center. Magnus was struggling for a plan, but now he's made it simpler. He's made it more clear for Magnus as to what he should be doing. So also, black's double pawns in the center. One of them's been traded off, so black's pawn structure now very, very healthy again. And Esipenko leaning forward. Jovanka, you said that meant that he likes his position, right? Yeah. Leaning forward. And he must like it because he's actually going on the attack. He's trying to use the fact he's got 2 extra moves compared to earlier by jumping with his knight, attacking a vulnerable pawn. The black pawn on e6 was up for grabs. It was attacked. And black's had to defend it. And now the attack continues. Esipenko continuing to gain space. I'm still not 100% sure that I'm keen on what he's done. Yes, he's gained time even more. Black's knight is forced back to its back rank, breaking the connection between black's rooks. But the stakes are higher. Long term now, black is actually doing fine if the queens come off, if some pieces get traded, get eliminated. And now he's manoeuvring his knight the whole way back. This is creative from the young Russian. Putting his knight on the edge of the board, knights on the rim are dim, but he's going to reroute it back towards the center. And more importantly, the white queen, her diagonal has opened up. She's going to jump forward, maybe onto the same line as the black king, and try to start attacking.
Yeah, dangerous stuff, actually.
Yeah, the more I look at it, the more it is logical, but it wasn't my first instinct, at least.
No, definitely not my first instinct. And now I look at it even more. I'm just like, oh, I like it. The knight will jump to the f4 square, and then the queen will join in, and there'll be like, oh, a pincer attack on this weak pawn that black has. There's a lot of danger. And remember, 3 is the magical number when it comes to mating attacks. And once the queen gets involved, yeah, it's troubling stuff for the world champion.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're completely right. The more I look at it, the more I think, actually, White is still in charge. Black is still struggling to find concrete ideas. White's moves are an automatic, simply next. Maybe Black can try jumping forward with the knight, making this one less attractive, because now the knight can create a fork, a double attack against the white rooks, but I don't know, it feels like Black is playing on the wrong side of the board here. And even if White were to lose material, which he doesn't want to do, but even if he were, then White's idea of jumping forward with the knight, attacking this pawn, they would still exist. And this Black king, very uncomfortable with this tension. So I'm pretty sure Magnus will try a move such as this one. This is an outpost after all, but he knows he's going to face a blistering attack at some point in the near future, especially with this white queen jumping forward.
Wow, 2 games in a row, struggling Magnus Carlsen against 2 of the youngest players in the tournament.
Yeah, on paper it looked like he had a relatively straightforward day. You know, he had 3 whites out of 4, you know, facing Abdusatorov and Esipenko, who aren't the highest rated, but they're young. They are dangerous.
Yeah.
And, you know, we asked for assistance about rhyming with double pawns. Well, Twitter, you have been awesome. And I have to share with you Will Hargreaves' idea, which is like, double pawns are troubled pawns.
Oh, nice.
Nice ones.
Yes. So much better than my one.
And St. Helens Chess Club also has a variation, which is pawns that are doubled, they're going to be troubled.
Ah.
Nice.
Nice ones.
I love it. Yes. So that's, you know, and this is so nice for me. At my beginner level, for when I play chess, to have these rhymes in my head, they're so helpful, actually. Yeah, with, you know, knights on the rim, and now the troubled pawns.
The double pawns?
Yeah.
Trouble pawns.
It's gonna be in the front of my head
You
when
know,
I play
Someone
chess.
should write a book, you know, all these chess sayings, all these idioms.
Maybe we should coin, like, make a note of all our sayings. 'Cause one of my favourite moments during the tour finals was actually before the tour finals. David and myself played a game of partner chess against Anish Giri and Agelin Martinez from Chess 24. And basically we played using all of our expressions.
I love it.
And
Even Anish Giri was quoting back some of our own sayings. But he couldn't deal with the moves. We were crushing them.
You won.
Yeah, I think we did.
The British power.
We drew one and won one.
I think so, yeah.
So,
of course you did.
Yeah, the sayings, they do work. And I mean, they don't necessarily need to dictate everything you do, but they're just triggers. In some positions, you're struggling to find a maneuver. You just ask yourself, what pawn structure do I want? Where do I want to put this piece? And these sayings, they come in handy.
Yeah.
I do it as well during my own games.
Yeah, I have to say, it's often at those moments, you know, sometimes when you're playing chess, you lose yourself in the calculations, all those variations and everything. And when you're right in the thick of it, sometimes you lose sight of what the actual objective is. And often when you take that step back and look at the position from a distance, you can kind of remember how the phrases go, the saying goes, and they can kind of just form the outline towards for these variations
and guide you back
into the right plan, because it's so easy just to kind of lose yourself, overthink, another deadly sin.
Yeah, every time you say lose yourself, I keep thinking of that Eminem song.
Yeah, me too.
And one player who's lost himself, maybe in his own mind right now, is Magnus Carlsen. He's spent 4.5 minutes on this move, and he's under 3 minutes already. It's not even move 20. In a classical game, he would normally have an hour and a half on his clock by now, but he clearly doesn't like his position. He's spent a lot of his time now on this one move. That means he's struggling to come up with a plan, struggling to come up with where to put the pieces, and it's understandable. Despite the fact the computer maybe thinks White has less of an advantage now, that doesn't necessarily show anything about the ease of play. And White's plan is simple, it's straightforward, as we showed. The White Queen is coming out, the White Knight is going to re-centralise. What's Black's plan? And I've been sitting here thinking about it. I can't find one either, or one that looks good. Sooner or later, though, Magnus will just have to move.
Yeah.
2 minutes on his clock, and he's playing a youngster who is super sharp, super quick, and is going to attack him with everything he's got.
And has beaten him before.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know.
Psychologically, that's important. Magnus himself said, right, he's only keen really to defend the world title against someone younger from the next generation, because that will be more of a challenge. He thinks he can beat anyone similar age to him. He's played Nepomniachtchi, he's played Karyakin, Caruana, who are all within a couple of years, but this next generation are coming.
Did you predict this move?
I didn't predict it immediately. I thought it might come next. I thought Black's knight might jump forward and then the rook would lift, but Magnus likes his rook lifts. That's one thing I've learnt over the years. And he's played it immediately. So indirectly, maybe that rook later on the 6th rank will guard the weak e6 pawn that you mentioned.
And then the black knight can come forward or maybe even retreat itself if necessary.
All right.
Nice defensive technique.
Wasn't it? It was Andrey Esipenko, right, that Magnus lost against in Tata Steel last year, where kind of his bad, form kind of started a little bit for Magnus Carlsen. He had a few quite bad tournaments after, or at least some bad games and some bad results after that.
Yeah, it wasn't just the fact he lost to Esipenko, it's the fact that he was completely outplayed from move 1 to the end of the game. And sometimes Magnus does lose, but we're used to seeing him lose from positions of strength where he maybe tries too hard or takes too many risks. But this game, from move 1 till move 35 or whenever it was, Esipenko just smoothly outplayed him.
Wow.
And Magnus didn't really have a chance. So, Esipenko is capable of that on his day. Still, these younger players, they're maybe not as consistent as someone like Magnus as the older generation, but they are very dangerous. And Esipenko leaning forward, meaning he likes his position.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have to say one thing, referring back to that game from Tata Steel, was that I noticed that Magnus also lost time in the opening. He wasted a lot of time. And here you have the same feature. He moved his knight to one square and then he moved it back again. And Esipenko, well, he's a man with a plan. He's activated his queen, and that was
Magnus
not
just ignores it.
He did just ignore the whole idea, and he's it looks like he's signalling that he's going to attack the pawn on the queen side, which looks a little bit irrelevant to me if you're...
Yeah, I mean, this looks like the type of move that Magnus, age 10 on the app, would play against me, and I would panic. But you don't expect to see this from Magnus, age 31. He's completely ignoring White's plans on the king side, which is actually the most important half of the board right now. That's where the attack is brewing against the black king. And he's just going pawn hunting with that black rook. He can't do that yet because White's knight and White's queen now are teamed up against the black e6 pawn. He's going to have to move his knight to defend that pawn, I think. The black knight on the 6th rank has to move out the way so Black's rook can connect and defend some vulnerable pawns. But it's not looking like there's a great square for the black knight. Either you move over again to that left side where you're not really contributing, or you retreat. And nobody likes to retreat, especially the top players. We've mentioned Magnus doesn't commit the sin of pride too often, but retreating another piece to the back rank, that would be a hard pill to swallow. It
feels so passive, doesn't it? It feels like you're curling up into a little ball, which, incidentally, we have seen Magnus do.
Yeah.
I can remember in the World Championship when he played against Nepomniachtchi, he needed to put all his pieces in a little compact square, and he managed to defend, set up a fortress. And wow, what is this?
OK, this is either very good or it's very, very bad. Magnus, he's gone pawn hunting, as I mentioned. This is the type of thing that maybe we're used to seeing from younger players where they're just focused on their own plans. Again, 7 deadly sins. This is egoism, focusing on your own plans, neglecting the opponent's ideas. But that pawn wasn't really doing much anyway, and now White can win a very important pawn in the centre. Why can't White just take that pawn, Jovanka?
I'm asking the same question. I want to take it with my knight. Well, my knight, White's knight. And then I want to be a little bit spicy, and I kind of want to introduce my other knight into the f5 square. Just kind of saying, hey, knight on f5 will thrive.
Yeah, another rhyme that we've coined on the tour. And this looks deadly going for the black king. But I do notice maybe there's a tactical trick here. After White's knight takes this pawn, there is a pin on this diagonal, and White currently isn't threatening anything. So maybe Black can retreat the knight and actually win a piece here, because this white knight, no matter where it moves, will lead to the loss of White's queen. And importantly for Black as well, this is quite hard visually to see. It took me a while as well. Black's knight on this square looks terrible, but it is guarding the important pawn in front of Black's king. So there's no way to break through and checkmate yet. Black's pieces, they look so ugly. parked here on the back rank, but they do keep everything under guard. And that is why I think Esipenko decided, OK, he can't take with a knight because of that nasty pin, this knight retreat, a very difficult move to see, but he spotted it and he decided instead to take this pawn with his queen. We see a queen trade, and now black's rook is almost trapped, but not quite. It moves one square forward. And the reason we didn't like this, or at least that I didn't like this, is because now white has a central passed and protected pawn. And also, these pawns are going to march forward at some point soon. This white knight is firmly entrenched in black's position. It's going to be hard to get rid of, actually. And it feels like definitely these central pawns, combined with their fellows here, are going to be far more valuable than these pawns that black has, which are simply doing nothing, which, if anything, are just targets. Looking very bad for black here.
Totally. I mean, I love the plan that you suggested with pushing that f-pawn 2 squares forward. Yeah. Make it go 1 more square as well.
Yeah.
All the way up the board. And then, like you say, it's what is black's plan? I mean, you can't push pawns.
Not easy.
Not easy. And every piece trade that you make, you kind of simplifies the position, and that's in white's favour.
Mm-hmm. You could also even start, or at some point flick in just a rook move to eliminate black's most active piece. You could just trade off a set of rooks here, and there's some attack against this pawn. Black can plug this file, plug this line with a knight, with a bishop, but this piece is just offside, and now you could continue with this plan, pushing forward, and I think white is in the driver's seat. You could even relocate this knight around, and okay, Esipenko decides to move his rook across. I guess he just wants to fix black's knight on this square. A slow move, not as quick and as direct as some of the plans we mentioned, but still looks pretty good for white.
I have to say, you guys, so it's looking good for Esipenko against Magnus Carlsen here, and this plan from the Champions Chess Tour organizers to have more fighting chess, it really seems to be working. I don't think we have seen a game today lasting less than 30 minutes, and at least all the games that we have followed have been fireworks all the time.
Yeah, true. On social media, sometimes I receive messages saying, oh, why was this player picked, or why was this player picked? Also, we've invited some really young, hungry players to the tour, and that's contributing, and that's definitely helping. But I think the new system, it's going to be fantastic. It's everything that we needed for chess, just to show that it is a sport, it is all about the fighting, and the players have that incentive now to fight in every single game.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm just looking back at the past results as well. Barely any draws, and even those draws were fighting games right to the bitter death.
Yeah.
And that's what we want, isn't it? Like 14-move draws, not exciting for anyone. Yes, I understand, the players want to get on to the next stage, but this way, with fighting chess and with financial incentives, it gives them players that little bit of extra motivation.
Yeah.
And I like it.
And it's probably not going to be enough with the draws anymore to make it to the knockout stage, because it is so many more points for those wins. You're going to need to go all in to get some wins.
Yeah, we mentioned this type of football scoring system with the prize money, but I mean, in football, if a team just draws all of their games for the whole season, they'll just get relegated, or they'll barely stay up in the division. And now we definitely won't be able to see players just coast to the finishing line, even if they start really well. No chance. But if they start really badly, there's always chances to bounce back.
Yeah, that's true as well. So what a start to the season, you guys. We have fighting chess from the get-go, and Magnus Carlsen is in trouble in Game 3 against Andrey Esipenko.
Look at those games at the bottom as well. The arrows, the evaluation bars, they're like, going crazy.
Yeah, look at that. Mamadjaro maybe making a comeback after 2 losses so far. Shakhriyar Mamadjaro, one of the most entertaining players in the world. Jan Nepomniachtchi, he also started with a loss today, but could he be about to win against Anish Giri? Yeah, looks like there's a lot of drama going on in round 3 here.
And the young Vincent Keimer from Germany beating Levon Aronian right now.
Wow. Oh, look at that.
So much drama. But meanwhile, a lot of drama on this board. And one thing as well that I've noticed, maybe Magnus had a connection issue because he got given some time back. Earlier, we thought he maybe just hated his position. He spent a lot of time on the clock, but it does look like maybe he was just disconnected. And here we do give the time back. We want to make sure each game is fair. So, yeah, we'll check back in on the clock times. We'll confirm that those are correct a bit later. But either way, it looks like Magnus, I mean, I'm pretty sure he doesn't like his position, but he didn't spend as long on the clock earlier as we thought.
And just going back to the board, we actually see a move played by Esipenko where he's kind of almost admitted that maybe his rook earlier move was a mistake because he could have offered this trade. And the point is that if black were to capture the rook, then white would have wasted time by just moving the rook from the f1 square to the c1 square and then moving it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both players losing moves in this game. That's something we tell, when people are learning the game, we say never lose time. Every move is important, every move matters. But here they're just mocking us, they're laughing, they're just saying, okay, I lost time with my rook. Earlier, Magnus lost time with his knight. It all balances out in the end. It's just about whether they are going for the most effective plans. It's not necessarily about timing yet, and that's because the centre's blocked. If the centre doesn't have too many pawns, then every move, the kind of price behind every move is so much higher. When the centre is slightly blocked, as it is now, with the pawns stopping each other advancing, then you can take a little bit more time. There's a bit more leeway in terms of the speed of your moves. And we do see the rook trade, and now black's knight has blocked the white rook, at least temporarily. Mm-hmm. And still liking white's position, Ivanka?
Loving white's position. And I was going to suggest this move, actually. Mm-hmm. Just the knight was being dominated by the black pawn on g6, so why not move it? And, OK, so Magnus just solidifying his pawn structure.
Yep. They're just creating those pawn chains, making sure everything protects each other. And I think now, or at least very soon, is the time for white to start pushing forward pawns, even in front of his own king. Now the queens are off, white's king will never really be in any danger, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Esipenko start throwing those pawns up the board. That's the side he's stronger on, after all. That's where he has the pawn majority. If you cut the board in half, if you just take the 4 files on the left and the 4 files on the right, white has a 4 versus 2 majority on the right half. And that's where he should be playing. Black, meanwhile, will try and play on the other flank, but it's maybe harder for black to initiate those pawn pushes because black's pieces aren't ready to support those pawns. Yeah. So it sounds simple when you break it down like that, but I do think Esipenko needs to keep things simple, especially because he's going a bit low on the clock right now. OK, interesting move, though. He brings his bishop forward, just cutting across some potential black plans, stopping black's knight at the top of the board from ever leaping forward. Black's knight there is dominated. That's quite a sneaky move.
Do you think he has plans of actually attacking the black rook?
And once he's attacked the black rook by retreating the knight, then he's forcing a trade of the bishop for the knight.
Yes.
And then possibly just kind of saying that bishop is like the linchpin of black's defense. Once it's gone, my bishop is superior.
OK, really interesting. That didn't even really cross my mind, Ivanka, but now you said it, it's definitely in the air. So right now, this bishop has landed on this square. That's actually a very good attacking square. If the queens were on, white would be very optimistic here because the black king would be in danger. And this bishop does cut across on this diagonal. As you mentioned, I'm not really sure what black could do to wait. For example, if the black pawn pushes. It's a bit loose, though. But now, white could just retreat the knight. We could see a trade, and maybe the white bishop will jump in now. Maybe white's pawns will march forward. Still looking very, very good for white. I'm slightly reluctant, personally, to remove this knight yet, just because it's so strong, it's so dominant, and does prevent the opposition knight from moving. But it's definitely something, an extra for Magnus Carlsen to think about right now. And personally, I would be thinking, OK, now is the time to push, and then try and support these pawns pushing even further later on.
Yeah.
But, yeah, a nice idea, though.
Yeah.
Back.
And one thing I just kind of wanted to mention about the black counterplay, you know, say black really tries to play aggressively and push his pawns. He can't do it. He's not ready for it because after pawn takes pawn, every move has its consequence. And then the white knight that relocated itself from g3 square has a role to attack 2 pawns.
And this pawn is indefensible now. Yep, this would win a pawn for white. So Magnus now instead choosing a bit of a weird move, bringing his rook forward. I guess he's hoping maybe that he can destabilize the white bishop, but he's also trying to tempt Esipenko into being a bit hasty and push this pawn forward, because now at least the black rook could get into the white position and come from behind to activate itself. It's, yeah, a very strange move to have to play, but maybe there was just nothing else. Black's rook pushing forward now, and yeah, I mean, there's so many tempting moves for white here. I see 3 or 4 immediately that I want to suggest.
Is that a problem, though, with 50 seconds on the clock?
Exactly.
It
yeah.
is.
That's the one thing that can get in the way of Esipenko now. There's just too many good moves. He could bring his knight across, gain time against the black rook, force it back where it came from. He could start pushing one of these two pawns. Just so many options right now.
He has to be a little bit careful because I think I spot the idea behind is to actually bring his king forward to attack the knight.
Okay, as well, to attack this knight.
But wait one second, you know, Esipenko has really played a very surprising move because I did not expect him to attack the rook and allow the rook to penetrate onto the third row.
Yeah, now the rook has access. That's why White's bishop has retreated. Both sides losing time here. Black using the rook several times. White also spending valuable moves with his bishop. Maybe now Magnus can try to, at some point, bring his king forward, but he has to be a bit wary of his rook getting trapped. I think, actually, if the king does march forward, then the white knight will step back, and suddenly the rook might be doomed. So suddenly getting very, very sharp. Let's go back to the players. OK, Magnus does bring his king forward.
Oh, we're going to see it, David. It's trapped.
That black rook is trapped. The white knight jumping back, actually, there, retreating. Not always easy to see. Knight retreats are the most difficult move to find in chess. But Magnus's idea is that he's attacking this white knight now. He's trying to release his rook from that cage.
But the rook is still trapped.
The rook is still trapped. Black's king needs to move now to create some escape squares. There we go. The black king stepping back where it came from, creating the escape squares for the black rook. If the white king steps up, which I'm pretty sure it will. There we go. The black rook can zoom all the way back. But who has weakened the position more? White's knight is offside now on the edge of the board, but White does have these pawn pushes to explode things open.
Exactly, and talking about pawn pushes, I was going to say, Harry, move him up the board. And after pawn takes pawn, look at those pawns coming. And
it's an avalanche.
Yeah, totally. And, well, there was two sides advanced their pawns on the right side, and only one side benefited, and that was Esipenko. Look at those two knights. They're just hovering in, jumping into those very weak squares. F5, H5.
Outposts.
Exactly.
Yeah, look at the evaluation bar, Kaya. It's suddenly up and +3 for White, and material is level on the board. I mean, that is normally a signal. If a computer loves your position so much to say +3, +4, and it's level material, it means you have complete domination. And look at Magnus's face right now. He is cringing, wincing. He hates his position. He's just been outplayed again by Esipenko. Esipenko is in his head. He's one of the players who he fears the most, Magnus Carlsen, and rightly so, judging by this game. The white knight, as Ivanka mentioned, is going to jump forward to F5, and that might just be game over. The white knights are just going to be too strong.
Is this very close now to Magnus's first loss of the 2022 season, basically?
He's hovering on the brink, and I'm almost going to say Magnus is not going to be able to come back from this.
No. Strategically, he's just dominated completely. And if this was over the board classical chess, I would estimate his survival chances at 5 or 10% maximum.
Whoa.
Rapid, maybe slightly more, but it's already at that stage, it's critical.
Yeah, his clock is ticking. So I guess the clock is one of his hopes right now. Andrey Esipenko is down on the clock, but he is showing to be very strong with little time. He's had around 1 minute for a long time now.
Yeah. And look at the focus on his face, Esipenko. He's barely blinked, barely looked away from the board in the last 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. And I have to say, he's following the Levon Aronian school of body language. Bobbing away. Yes. Got this. Yes. He plays this. I do that. Sorry. I don't know why I mentioned this.
It's true, though. It's keeping the adrenaline pumping, right? It's not letting the energy slip, not even for 1 second.
Yeah.
Well, we had some decided games in this round. Shakhdar Mamedyarov, he won now his game against Alexander Kostenyuk. And Liam Le, a great win for him against Eric Hansen. All the other games still going on, also a draw between Abdusattorov and Artemiev.
OK, a couple of moves. White's knight has jumped forward. Black's king now trying to join the defence. But more importantly, OK, there has been a trade. White has won a pawn. I was going to say the black rook went passive to defend things, but White did initiate a trade there, swapping off one of his great white knights for the black bishop, but that black bishop was a key defender. And now White has actually a 3-0 majority on the right half, and they're marching forward. Yeah,
and I was trying to get greedy, actually. I wanted to retreat the bishop to destabilise the knight. Yeah. And that
would have been equally good, I think.
Yeah.
Everything is winning now for Esipenko. He's a pawn up, and he has these 3 pawns ready to push forward, and they will cost Black at least a knight, maybe even more. And Magnus just trying to hold up the advance of those pawns. The white bishop now It's a bit stuck. If it moves, then the black rook will come down and take a pawn, but white's king can join the action. White's rook at some point will start swinging across. This one, actually, you can even tell on Magnus's body language, leaning back. He knows he's in huge trouble. He knows he's barely got any chance to survive, but he's just hoping and praying for a blunder, hoping for Esipenko to get nervous.
Definitely. I mean, there is a hidden threat in the position. The black knight is actually threatening to move itself to the e6 square, attacking the bishop and the pawn on d4.
But he's not given time.
Nope.
Esipenko now jumping forward with his own knight, attacking the black rook. If the black rook moves itself, if it keeps itself on the g file, as it does, then the white rook might start swinging across at some point. The black rook is almost trapped, actually. There we go. The white bishop just moves. The black rook forced to run away from the attack. And now I think Esipenko can just trap that black rook. Look at this. The black rook entrenched between white's pieces. And
it's going to be game over.
Yep. The black rook was, I mean, simply nowhere to go. It gives itself up for the white knight. And we've seen a result, a fist pump from Esipenko.
Wow.
He's won. He's beaten the world champion.
What a result from the 19-year-old making his debut in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, winning Game 3 against Magnus Carlsen, the world champion.